far for this part of our series, I should say, this book of Esther, living in a mixed up world, okay? We live in a world that is just completely on top of itself, mixed up, backwards. We have homes with mixed marriages. One spouse is Christian, the other one's not. We have families that are all mixed up. We got just a mixed up world, both generically and specifically within our own cultures. Well, now we're going to have a mixed up sermon. Okay, we're going to really do this up and have a lot of fun with this. This is the special edition of Choose Your Own Sermon Adventure. Now, for those that, some people just Monty Python me. Thank you for that. Yay. Okay, this is exciting. This is fun. I mean, maybe once you realize what's at stake here, you will really appreciate it even more. So here's what's going to be happening. When I was in junior high, late grade school, some of my favorite books were the Indiana Jones Find Your Own Adventures or Zork Find Your Own Adventure type books. It's where you start reading, you get to a point, and it says, what should the character do next? If you think the character should do this, then go to this page. If they should do this, go to this page, or this, go to that page. And then I would say, I think they should do this. Turn to that page, and it says, you died. Close the book, throw it away. A short story. But then you back up and you go through it again. But those were those great adventures of those. You get to actually interact a little bit. And sometimes you get 5 or 6 lines in to find out you should have made a whole different choice way back in chapter 1. And it was fun and it was exciting. Well, we're going to do that today. That's why you got these little numbers handed out to you. Occasionally, several times, between 3 and 4 or 5 times, depending on the route you pick, we're going to be able to choose between 1 or 2 choices. The reason why not 3 is because then you would have a second stick, and I know some of you would just hold up both and just mess me up. 1 and 3, 1 and 3, come on. So I made sure to keep it to 2, okay? So either a 1 or a 2. So what's going to happen when we get to that, you get to hold up whatever answer you think you would like to go to. So 2 or 1. And then I will look across the sea of numbers, and I will do my best to discern which one is the yes.
Can you tell us which choice is the shortest?
I will not tell you which one is the shortest. Thank you for that. Thank you for that. Yes, somewhat. There is actually one sermon line that would be about an hour and 10 minutes, and there is one that is about 25 minutes. I timed them out, but I'm not telling you which one. And so nonetheless, this is how that's going to work. And just to kind of give you a little glimpse of this is an example of my flow chart. I did change some things, and you don't know which one goes which way. But here's the actual implications of this. We'll have a question, and then you get to choose 1 or 2, okay? And so then 1 or 2, whichever way it goes, will then lead you down various paths. And those paths will actually lead you to one of 2 different survival tips. So you might remember we've had a survival tip every week. Well, this time there's 2. You're only going to get 1. And when you pick 1, if you might notice, we're not going to come to this. It's not like some pastors came to me and said, oh yeah, we've done this before. I had one email, personal message sent to me saying, oh yeah, I've done something like this where I had them choose the order of my points. No. It is literally this point or this point. If you pick this point, the other one's gone. Okay, we're not covering it. We're not going back to it. It is gone. We're talking, there are actually 6 different potential sermons here covering different points. So normally I come into this with 2 pages, maybe 2.5 pages of notes. I got 8, and not all of them are being talked about. We're going to have a combination of those pages, okay? So it's not all of them are going to be talked about, and we got 2 different survival tips. We got 3 totally different endings. Some of them do come to endings that are similar, but as far as topical thematic endings, there are 3 actually unique endings as well. So there's real implications here. And when we do our survival tips recaps and future sermons coming up, the one that you guys end up picking will be on that from now to the end of the series. Okay, the other one, bye-bye. So it's going to be exciting. And for the people that are watching online or those that are watching on video on YouTube, later, I'm going to make sure I have my own tag here. So whatever is voted on by you all, I will hold up so the people at home or on video can be able to see it and say, oh, they picked 2 or they picked 1. So you guys ready? I'm going to start you off with one that is not going to be the determining one. I want to warm you guys up. So I'll let you pick the introduction, just to kind of warm things up a little bit, get you used to how this is going to work. And then we'll hit the question that will determine the direction of the sermon. So this one, you can rest ease. This one will not determine our sermon yet. This is just an introductory question. Would you rather hear, vote number 1, if you'd like to hear the recap of survival tips 1 through 5. Vote number 2, if you'd rather hear a Ziva story. Okay, so would you rather hear the recap, or would you rather hear, it's like everybody but one lone wolf or 2 lone wolves have picked, everybody picked 2. So 2 it is, the Ziva story. 2 people picked 1. And it's okay to be a loser. It really is. No, you're not a loser, you're special. So okay, the Ziva story. The Ziva story is as follows then. About a week and a half ago, I kid you not, my wife was playing with our kids, and you're having a good time, and after a while of playing, you can tell she's getting tired. She's getting exhausted, and she sits down in the chair, and she goes, okay, you kids just play. Mommy's tired. I need a break. And Ziva went up to her and said, are you exhausted, Mommy? And Rachel said, yeah, I'm exhausted. And Ziva said, well, that's because your belly's big. Now, people are like, oh my gosh, And Ziva and Rachel, in her great sense of humor that she has, went, you're right. Okay, yeah, Mommy's belly is probably bigger than it should be. And then Ziva said, you need more sweating to the oldies. And then Rachel said, you're probably right. And Ziva said, I'll go get my shorts and I'll do it with you. And Ziva takes off running across the house. It's just great. My daughter's 4, okay? And she's talking about sweating to the oldies and calling my wife fat. It just was a hilarious, great moment. But before we judge her and say, oh, how dare she say that, how terrible, we all make judgments like that. No, not about my wife. We all make judgments like that. What happens is we usually have this filter that says inside voice, outside voice, right? That's usually what we have. And sometimes those lines between the two get blurred, right? And so what we're going to be discovering today in our nice little wonderful sermon series is what happens when we really get those lines too blurred and it starts determining our actions between our inside and outside voice, and what happens when we start doing things inappropriately, because sometimes our inside voice might be somewhat true, but it also might be false, and it definitely might not be right. Okay, so we're going to have to try to deal with that. And so, before we kick right into that, I think it'd be good for us to kind of get familiar with the text. We're going to read all the verses at once, so that regardless of which way you guys choose, we at least read all the verses. Okay, so we're going to start with book of Esther. I almost said Ephesians. That would have been interesting. We're going to do the book of Esther, chapter 3, starting at verse 2, working our way through verse 11. And it says as follows here. The entire royal staff at the king's gate bowed down and paid homage to Haman because the king had commanded this to be done for him. But Mordecai would not bow down or pay homage. The members of the royal staff at the king's gate asked Mordecai. This is like a continual asking, by the way. It's not just one time. Okay, ask Mordecai, why are you disobeying the king's command? When they had warned him, how often? Day after day. He's refusing to bow. They warned him day after day, and still he would not listen to them. They told Haman to see if Mordecai's actions would be tolerated, since he had told them he was a Jew. So now Mordecai reveals his ethnic identity. When Haman saw that Mordecai was not bowing down or paying him homage, it's interesting, Mordecai might not have seen it right away. It sounds like he almost got wind of it from people tattling. It's interesting. Okay, so when Haman saw that Mordecai was not bowing down or paying him homage, he was filled with rage. And when he learned of Mordecai's ethnic identity, Haman decided not to do away with Mordecai alone. He planned to destroy all of Mordecai's people, the Jews, throughout Ahasuerus' King Xerxes' kingdom. In the first month, the month of Nisan, in King Ahasuerus' 12th year, that is, the lot, was cast before Haman for each day and each month, and it fell on the 12th month, the month Adar. Then Haman informed King Ahasuerus, there is one ethnic group scattered throughout the peoples in every province of your kingdom. yet living in isolation. Their laws are different from everyone else's, and they do not obey the king's laws. It is not in the king's best interest to tolerate them. If the king so approves, let an order be drawn up authorizing their destruction, and I will pay 375 tons of silver. Wouldn't mind having that myself. 375 tons of silver to the accountants for deposit in the royal treasury. The king removed a signet ring from his finger and gave it to Haman, son of Hammedatha, the Agagite, the enemy of the Jewish people. Then the king told Haman, the money and people are given to you to do with as you see fit. Basically, go destroy the Jews. Okay, now that brings us to our first wonderful question to vote upon here. That question is this: do we start talking about the heinous handout of Haman the Horrible? That would be talking about that letter that he sent out and gave to Xerxes, or the who's and how's of bow vows, dealing with the motivations regarding why or how Haman and Mordecai acted the way they did regarding bowing. So should we do number one, the heinous handout of Haman the Horrible, or two, the who's and how's of bow vows? And looking around, we got a couple of ones, but we got a whole bunch of twos. So the who's and how's of bow vows. And believe me, it took everything within my ability and power not to quote the song, Who Let the Dogs Out? I came really, really close to that, to doing that one. So let's go to the who's and how's of bow vows. So starting off here, what we have is, we see that Mordecai would not honor Haman. In fact, he flat out dishonors him, and there has been a lot of controversy regarding, was Mordecai in the right or was he in the wrong for not bowing? And let me just, before we dig into that conversation, let me just offer a little weird insight for you. How much of a spine has Mordecai had up to this point? None. Okay, I mean, think about this. People show up to take his adopted daughter to Hugh Hefner's palace to sleep in his bed. And he says nothing. But bowing, that's where he draws the line. Now, suddenly he grows a spine and starts saying, no, 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 not me, not me. And I don't know about you, but that seems like a really weird place to draw the line. You know, when you look at abduct my daughter and force to sleep with her in an impure bed versus bowing, it's just weird to draw your line over here and not up here. 'Cause I don't know about you, I draw my line at sleeping with my daughter. You know, that's just where I draw my line. You know, if somebody comes to me and says, you want to take your daughter, send her to Hugh Hefner to sleep with her, you cross my line. You not only cross my line, that line, and you're so far past the line, that line's a dot to you. Okay, that's just where I draw my line. And Haman doesn't draw it there. He draws it at bowing. And that's just odd. I just want to point that out. That's really, really, really odd. Okay, and so now Mordecai suddenly is saying, no, 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 no. So I find it weird, and I want you to see the weirdness of that as well. And people have tried to make various excuses, if you will, or interpretations for Mordecai to explain why he didn't bow, because the Bible doesn't say. The Bible gives no indication why he doesn't bow. We don't get a thus saith the Lord, Mordecai, I commend you or condemn you based upon. We don't get that. So we're going to have to make some assumptions by looking at the situation of the text. And yes, it is possible to make errors when you do that. So we have to be very, very careful. So the responses I'm going to be sharing, I kind of draw in pencil. I reserve the right to have an incorrect view and that I can go back and erase it and change it later and replant my flag someplace else. I just want to approach it with that type of humility. Meanwhile, I think my answer is pretty good. But we'll see. We'll see. Like I said, I could definitely be wrong. Just want to point that out. First off, there are some people that have tried to say that this was an act of worship, that Mordecai was being more faithful to God here, was rejecting bowing to Haman because that would have been recognizing Haman as deity. and therefore Mordecai was in the right not to bow. Now, here's the problem. Then they tend to quote Daniel chapter 3 and chapter 6. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego not bowing before the idol that was there that Nebuchadnezzar had built. Okay, you know what I'm talking about? So they tend to quote that passage. Problem. That was Babylonians in that passage with Nebuchadnezzar. This is Persians. Persians are more militaristic. They don't view bowing as a sign and recognition of deity. That's not how Persia functioned. Persia viewed bowing, historically, very much like how we would view saluting an officer of a higher rank, a recognition of chain of command. If you would, maybe even similar to how we might act if the Queen of England were to come in. How do you respond to the Queen of England? You're supposed to bow to the royalty that's there. And it's not that you're saying, oh, a goddess is present. It's a respectful bow, very similar to the Japanese business culture. You walk in and they bow to each other, a recognition of authority, a recognition of a business approval, recognition of status, whatever the case may be. It's not a worshipful act. And so that's how it was within Persia. And so it really doesn't fit when you try to take Babylonian culture and say that's why Persia did this. And that's not the case there. So we can't make that conclusion there. Persia was very different. Another issue that goes on to play is that people tend to say, because Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego did not bow, because we see bowing prostrate before the Lord, therefore the Jewish culture viewed bowing as worship and recognition of a deity. Well, that would be true then only if that were consistently, and there were no exceptions, except throughout Scripture, there are countless just about exceptions of people bowing to where it was appropriate to bow and no, it was not an act of deity worship. Okay, and that would be, for example, you might remember Joseph's brothers bowing to him when he was the ruler in Egypt. In fact, Joseph was given a dream by God about his family bowing to him, and they were not recognizing him as a god. We get King David bowing to King Saul, 1 Samuel 24:8. Or we get Bathsheba bowing to David. Ironic little twist there. That happened in 1 Kings 1:21. And so on and on the list can go here of people in the Old Testament that bowed, and it was not an act of recognition of deity. It was an act of respect, an act of a recognizing chain of command. It was recognizing who was boss, if you will. Okay, like saluting in the military. It was that type of an issue throughout many parts of the Old Testament. So we really can't say that Mordecai was bowing because of religious reasons, because we don't have a big standard for that set up that he would have responded in that way. So I know it's a traditional view that Mordecai bowed for religious reasons. I just find it inconsistent with a lot of the data that's present. There are obviously, I believe, other issues at play. So then what were the motivations for Mordecai not bowing? Like I said, the most common one is a religious reason, traditional view. I would like to personally cross that off the list. I don't think that was really the issue here at play. I think it was something else. There is a second reason that's part of the traditional view that I think is somewhat possibly at play here, and that's a political or historical reason. I don't think it's by accident that the author tells us that Haman belonged to what lineage? Agag, okay? And Agag was the leader of the Amalekites. The Amalekites were under what was called the harem. The harem, you got to put phlegm in that. You guys want to say it with me? Sound like fun? It's just harem, but harem. You got to have a h in the R. Okay, so harem. Just kind of, if you do it on the H, it carries through the R and it's fine. Okay, so you guys ready? 1, 2, oh, you guys are spitting already. I have to mop. Okay, all together now. 1, 2, 3. Harem. The harem was a command by God to the Israelites occasionally, to where Israel would be the instrument of God's judgment. Okay, this is where God told Israel to perform the harem, to be his sword, to cast judgment upon a people. And that meant total annihilation. Even women, cattle, all the goods, no spoils of war. Wipe them all out. Total judgment. And before you start thinking, wow, women and children too? Yeah, women and children too. Well, that's really horrible of God. Well, when Jesus returns and the second coming happens, guess who's going to be under that judgment? women and children too. Okay, so it is always people that are under judgment because we are in violation of God's holiness. Okay, so God occasionally says, my line has been done. I am now going to perform the harem. I'm going to do full judgment, and Israel is going to be my instrument of that judgment. And so he told King Saul and Israel, perform the harem upon the Amalekites. King Saul did what? He did not kill Agag. Technically speaking, if Saul had been a faithful king, Haman would not even be alive. This whole story would be mute, okay, because there would be no Haman. There should be no Haman. Haman only exists because King Saul sinned. And just let your mind wrap around that, the implications of sin sometimes. Because Saul did not kill King Agag, let him live, and even kept some of the spoils. This is why, okay, that God told Saul, you will not be king, and no descendant of you will ever be king. This has led some people to believe that Mordecai, because Kish is mentioned, that Kish is the same Kish that was King Saul's granddaddy or father, was also Mordecai is from that line. So therefore, Mordecai is in a position of sitting at the king's gate, knowing he could never have the option of ever getting onto king because of the ongoing curse because of Saul not killing Agag. And then you got Haman coming in, a descendant of Agag, a constant reminder of Mordecai's ceiling of never advancing. So therefore, Mordecai could look upon Haman and say, why should I bow to you? You shouldn't even be living right now. You have no business to even have air in your lungs, and you are a constant reminder to me that I will never, and none of my descendants will ever descend to the throne or ascend upon the throne. And if that is indeed true, then Mordecai not bowing is because Mordecai is being a jerk. Right? Because he should then bow. It's not a worshipful issue. It's a personal pride issue at that point. And so I definitely think that is part of what's going on. In addition to the jealousy and pride, in addition to that, Mordecai, get my name straight, Mordecai got through saving the life of the king, and who got honored? Haman got honored instead of Mordecai. So now Mordecai is like, you got my promotion. You got my promotion. You got promoted. You got to higher up in command above all other people. Now I didn't get it. Of course I didn't get it. That would put me closer to the throne. And God won't put me closer to the throne because of the curse. So gur on God and gur on Haman. And so now Mordecai is frustrated. And he's upset, and he's jealous, and he's prideful. So he's like, I will not bow to you. Never will I bow to you. You shouldn't be living. You Agagite, you horrible person. I spit upon you. I will not bow. And I'm actually not even too pleased with God at the moment. Okay, that's kind of where Mordecai's coming from. Right? That's where Mordecai, I believe, is coming from. So that's the point of view I'm taking as to why Mordecai did not bow. And it's interesting that he mentions Jew. He tells Esther, don't reveal your heritage. I haven't revealed my heritage. Don't reveal your heritage. Keep it quiet. Keep it quiet. As far as we can tell, for over 40 years, maybe even longer, Mordecai has kept his heritage a secret. He hasn't shared, hasn't said anything about being a Jew, hasn't said anything about worshiping God, hasn't said anything about prayers, hasn't said anything about dietary laws, hasn't said anything about anything that he's supposed to be doing as a good Jew. And when the Jews are going to rebuild the temple, he's not helping, he's not going back to Israel like he's supposed to, like he was told to by the different prophets and even by the kings who said, go back to Israel, rebuild your temple. Mordecai's not doing it. He's hiding that he's a Jew, keeping it quiet. He's not dressing like one, not eating like one, not talking like one, not behaving like one. He's just, as far as anyone's concerned, he's Persian. Now suddenly he mentions he's a Jew. I think he name dropped. It's like playing the race card. People don't do that today, though, do they? They don't just play the race card because it benefits them at a certain moment. Yeah, they do. We've done that all throughout history. We just play the race card. We just say, you know what, I don't want to deal with it. You, like, I get this all the time. I'll be at the bus station, and I'll say, you know, it's this much. Why is it that much and not this much? Because it's the price of the ticket. It's because I'm black, isn't it? That's why you're charging me more money. I get that at school sometimes. People will tell me, why did you mark me down on my grammar? Is it because I'm black? No, it's because your grammar's not right. Your paper wasn't written right. That's why. If anything has to do with color of anything, it's the ink on the page. That's the only black that's the problem here. It has nothing to do with ethnicity. And it's you don't have commas in the right place. You got run-on sentences. You don't got the thing formatted to APA format. I graded you down for it. And I guess what? There's people that are white that are graded down too, because that's how that works. But people want to play the race card. And I think that might have been what Mordecai did. He's like, they kept hounding him day after day. Why aren't you bowing? Why aren't you bowing? He's like, you know what? Because I don't want to. You know what? Because I don't want to. Why would I bow to that sniveling little idiot? Why would I bow to that little whatever? Why should I bow to, you know what? Leave me alone. Leave me alone. Leave me alone. I'm a Jew. That's the problem. Now will you leave me alone? Now will you leave me alone? I'm a Jew. That's it. That's the reason. And then they go and they tell Haman that Mordecai is a Jew, and that's why he's not bowing. Well, is that going to help anything? No. Let's ask a different question real quick before we get to our next split. What's Haman's motivation? I'm actually going to defend Haman just a little bit. I love the look on your faces. Haman does sin. Genocide, bad. Anti-Semitism, bad. Okay? All that's bad. Haman goes a very dark route. He's like a granddaddy to Hitler, basically. So yes, Haman's a bad dude. I also have a little bit of understanding over his frustration. Think of it like this. If you were a boss and you had an unsubordinate employee, what would you do? I mean, just think about that for a moment. How mad would you get at that insubordinate employee who is not doing what they're supposed to be doing? They don't follow your orders. You tell them what to do, and they just say, you know what, I'm going to do it my way because my way is better. I don't want you to do it that way. I want you to do it this way. This is the way I want it done. I'm the boss. You're the employee. And they're not doing it. They want to do it their own way. They think it's faster. They think it's better. They want to do their own thing, whatever. And how frustrated do you want to get? How much do you want to completely terminate their employment? And anyone like them, you'll terminate their employment too. Insubordinate employees. And this happens all the time, and it should happen. That people get fired for being insubordinate. Okay, I totally get that. It should happen. You're supposed to have a chain of command. Your boss says to do something, you do it. As long as it's not sin, you do it, right? That's how it's supposed to be. Like a general in the military, they give an order. What do the people underneath do? They do the order. It's what's supposed to happen. If they don't do it, they get in trouble. Potentially even fired, dishonorable discharge, whatever the case is. So I get Haman's issue. I understand where he's coming from. He's looking at this and he says, why aren't you bowing? Everyone else is. And if somebody didn't bow to the Queen of England, how would people respond? How upset would people get? How much would the news hear about a Southern Baptist church would not bow to the Queen of England? And they would get irate. Maybe even more irate than over Cecil the Lion. You never know how irate they'll end up getting, But they would get irate. They'd be twittering it, hashtagging it. Okay, it would be a problem. Okay, so I get Haman's point of view. So Haman gets frustrated. Haman gets angry, and he says, "You know what? Why won't you bow? If you don't like the rules, then leave the country." Oh wait, you were told to go home as it is. And how often do we feel that way about people? When they don't do things appropriately and they're from another country and they say that it's our problem for being Americans, and we say, well, if you don't like America's rules, leave. It might be more of an inside voice, not an outside voice, but we have that inside voice from time to time. I know I've had it. Okay, and so we get frustrated with people that just don't do things right. And so Haman's mad. And he says, fine, if it's because you're Jewish, then let's go ahead and settle this. And then Haman does something bad. Okay, because what Haman does is he takes an exception and he obsesses. Of course, men don't do that today. Everything's going great in life. One area is not going well, and they're just going to obsess over that one area. They get a glowing review from the boss, but one point of criticism, and all they can do is obsess over that one point of criticism. You get a review back from all your students if you're a teacher, and you get all great reviews, but one person gave you a horrible marks, and you just obsess over that one horrible mark. Why did that student say that? Why? Of course, we're not like that. Yeah, we are. He obsesses. He obsesses, and his fear, he goes total Yoda. Right? Yoda in episode 1 says, fear leads to anger. Anger leads to hate. Hate leads to suffering. Right? So Haman has a fear that says, what if? What if other people follow suit? What if I don't ever get respect? What if it just becomes a regime type retaliation? What if it ends up being mutiny? What if? So he has fear, and out of that fear comes anger, and out of that anger comes hate. And from that hate will eventually come suffering. That's what happens when it goes unchecked. So Haman goes to the route of severe, severe sin. Not that we're all too extremely unfamiliar with such a thing. But that then leads us to our next point. So get your numbers ready. We'll see where we go next. Do we now from here go to talking about the spirit realm? That means dealing with the casting of lots. Or do we go to number 2, which we start talking about how Xerxes, pretty much as lazy as you can get, just blindly accepts Haman's idea? And what's going on with that? So would you like to talk about the spirit realm and the casting of lots, or Xerxes, a lazy thinker, blindly just accepting whatever is going on? Oh, this is interesting. I'm going to have to do some counting here. Let's see. We got some people not even voting. Like, I don't care. I don't know. I'm just not holding anything up, whatever. Pastor John, flip a coin. Don't use my name in vain. Come on, that's funny. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 twos. And so we have more 2s than 1s, so we're going to go with 2, which is Xerxes, the lazy thinker, and dealing with that route. Now, for those that are really wanting to know number 1, if somebody were to text me or email me, I will be glad to text you or email you the thoughts about the spirit realm and the lots, or if I get enough emails, I'll make a blog post out of it. So I will share that because I know there was quite a few people at least somewhat intrigued by that. But nonetheless, let's go to Xerxes, our lazy thinker. Now, I would like to start by asking a simple question here. You guys, do you ever, and have you ever told a story where you twisted some details or left information out in such a way that it came to your benefit? Yes, I know we all have at some point. When we try to share what happened, we exaggerate a detail, or we leave out a detail completely, or we emphasize something in such a way that it is to our benefit. We learn this from a very early age. Children do this. Okay, when little kids, if we find them playing, I found this already with my daughter. She's 4, my son is 2, and already they do this. Whenever they start fighting, I'll hear a slam, a crash, George will go, ah! And Ziva will go, ah! And then whoever can run to me the fastest starts telling me what happened, their side of the story. And it's always twisted in some way to benefit their point of view. Okay, so Ziva will come up to me and she'll say, George just did this. And then George comes in going, because he's 2. He doesn't have a vocabulary yet. And so my inclination is to want to go, Ziva, you're right. Obviously, you're telling the truth. You're such a cute little girl with your flowing red curly hair, apple after my eye. I've known you longer. I've known you for 4 years. I've only known this little brat for 2. You know, we have a deeper relationship right now. And so clearly my daughter, no way could this cute little girl tell a lie. No way could she change the details, leaving stuff out to benefit her. No way she would tell me I took it from George and then he hit me in the face. No way would she say that. No, it's just George hit me in the face. which is, by the way, what he has learned to do when Ziva takes stuff from him. She pulls it from him, and she runs into the other room, sits on the chair. He'll walk up to her, climb into her lap, look at her, and go, bap! And then climb off and keep on going. And I'm telling you, from the outside, slapping in the face is never right. So that's just wrong altogether. Yes, Ziva was wrong, but George, no, you're really in the wrong too. But second, out of the blue, you should watch Ziva walk into a room, sit in a chair. George walks up, smack, and leaves. I go, George, what's up? And then I find out, she took something from him and tripped him so he couldn't catch her, whatever the case is. Okay, so here's the thing. Haman, telling you, it's World War III in my house. Okay, and it's great because a lot of you who have kids or have siblings, you know this to be true. Okay, and so it's Proverbs is really, really exact on this. In fact, there was a, let's see here, Proverbs 18:17 reads like this: everyone seems right until the other side is heard. Okay, that's Proverbs 18:17. Everyone seems right until the other side is heard. And that is completely true. Except here's what Xerxes does not do. Xerxes does not investigate. He does not hear the other side of the story. He does not research. He just accepts Haman's point of view, and he completely runs with it. Okay, completely runs with it. And this is a real temptation for us today, if you ever stopped and thought about it. How we do that a lot. How often do we tend to make our judgments based upon how people are dressed? You see somebody on the corner with a little sign that says, help, need food, and we start thinking, you're a scam artist, you're part of this ring, or you're here because it's your own fault. And we automatically make judgments because we heard a story or read or saw a news article that gave a point of view where there are scams happening and there are rings existing. And that is very, very true. Does that mean that everybody who's on the corner is part of that? And we can't necessarily make that judgment too quickly because there could be exceptions to that. It's interesting how when you have two people that are fighting, I notice this at the bus station all the time when people are fighting, the person who's dressed the best wins whenever the authorities are involved. Okay, and whoever smells the best wins. If there's a person who hasn't been in a shower for several days or even a couple weeks and they happen to have a body odor and they're claiming that somebody who's in a suit and smelling nice and all clean cut took something from them, and they start fighting, and the person who smells bad starts grabbing the guy and trying to say, give me back my money, give me back my wallet, whatever, and they're coming out of the bathroom that way screaming, and the authority gets involved, automatically, I've seen this happen too many times, the security will separate the two and surround the guy who smells bad, who looks like he's in dingier clothes, and will start saying, what do you think you're doing? Okay, and they start siding that way. Have you ever noticed within church government, if you go to this church and other churches, I've seen this, I've been to so many churches, I've looked at all their rosters and I've looked at leadership. It's interesting, it's very rare poor people are in positions of leadership. It's very rare somebody who's living on food stamps and welfare and has Medicaid, Medicare, very rare that they're in positions of leadership. Are they unqualified because they don't make very much money? No, that's not a qualifier. But when we make those judgments without seeing the whole story, we don't investigate. We kind of look at, well, here's two people. Here's a guy that has a PhD or he has an MD or whatever, and he's going to be, they're both vying for the same Sunday school teacher position. Here's this guy that's poor. He works at a factory. He does all that he can, but his house is run down. Who's going to get the vote? El doctoro. And by the way, just because somebody has an MD does not mean they're automatically gifted in understanding and teaching the Bible. Just because somebody's a good teacher in high school or middle school does not mean they're a good teacher of God's word. They're very different things. It's possible to be a good teacher, but a bad teacher of God's word because they just aren't theologically grounded. They aren't schooled right. They haven't really learned scripture. They haven't delved into it. And so they're not as qualified as somebody who isn't a teacher in a school system, but they are indeed well and gifted at teaching God's word. But we don't make those types of research methods. We don't try to take time to really figure out the whole picture. And it's interesting, isn't it? We look at somebody who's well-dressed and we'll either believe them or not believe them because they're well-dressed. Somebody says they're a Democrat, a Republican, or a Libertarian, or an independent. We suddenly start making judgments about them, good or bad, because of that. Okay, I'll tell you the truth. When all of a sudden I started hearing that Donald Trump was going to run for the GOP thing, I went, are you kidding me? This is going to be a freak show. Well, what the heck? You know, and because I'm like, Donald Trump's a sleazeball in my opinion. But at the same time, I was like, I also don't know anything about this guy's political views. I know he seems to be a sexist pig when I watch his interviews regarding his Miss America competitions that he runs, and I see a lot of the stuff that he has said that just looks absolutely crazy, and I hear people talking about how much of an idiot he is. But is he an idiot? I mean, he is a billionaire. If anybody could help us try to figure out our debt problem and our tax deficit, wouldn't it be somebody who's good at business, not somebody who's just good at laws? And whether he's a good guy or not a good guy, he obviously knows how to do business. He knows how to take a deficit and turn it around. So that's interesting. So you have to start wondering, I'm not saying I'm voting for him. I'm not saying that at all. In fact, I can tell you pretty clear I'm not. I'm just saying that it's interesting when we try to see the whole picture, how we might start not being so quick to be down on someone. But we really got to try to not be lazy thinkers, to just accept whatever we get, to just go on Facebook, read an article, and say, I read the news. Did you know Ed Setzer recently did a big blog post, and I love, by the way, if ever you get a chance, just be a member of Ed Setzer's website, okay? He's a Southern Baptist theologian. He's a great guy. I believe he recently got some big promotion to work with Lifeway, and he's just a really neat guy. And he went through about how there's a big problem right now on Facebook, how people are posting news sites of articles that are 100% fake, even though the news site web address says usatoday.com. Because he pointed out what people are doing is they're buying usatoday.com.co. So it's not USA Today, but they buy the website that has USA Today in the title, and then they design their web page to be identical of USA Today with the same type ads, animations flowing, same format, same layout with the logo and everything. Infringement of copyright, but you think they care? Okay, they got all the logo and everything there. Then they post an article saying whatever they want to say. And then people are reading it going, oh my gosh! And then they post it, and they share it. And then the news. You can even go to, slopes.com is a decent site to figure out what's real and what's not real. There's a lot of sites out there, but do people go to those sites? Do they notice that they're going to WashingtonJournal123.com rather than Washington Journal? Okay, are they recognizing that the Washington Journal doesn't even have their website named that? It's actually WJP.org, so it's something different. People don't know, because they're lazy thinkers, completely lazy thinkers. And then we get the political, we have an election, by the way, next year. We got, big one coming up, primaries this year, and then we got the election itself next year. And you know what people are going to say? They're going to come at you with a whole bunch of data. And we're going to look at it, and we're going to try to make judgments probably without seeing the whole picture, without even really trying. That's going to be the temptation. To rely on whatever CNN says, to rely on whatever Fox says, to rely on whatever Headline News says, to rely on whatever Facebook says, to rely on whatever. And what we're going to hear is the vote for person A, they will lower taxes, put money in your pocket. And then another person will say, hey, vote for person B because they're going to go ahead and tax the rich people and then put the money into your pocket. So they won't lower taxes, they'll raise it, but just for the rich people and then give the money to you. And on it's going to go. But what's going to be the big motivator there when they start doing stuff like that? Money. Now, what's Xerxes motivated by when Haman says, I will deposit 375 tons of silver into the treasury? What do you think Xerxes' motivation is? Money. How easy it is to be our benefit, be the motivator. What benefits me? A lot of people will look at presidential candidates and they'll say, well, what benefits me? They won't ask what benefits the country. Because it could be what benefits the country does not benefit you at all. It might even hurt you a little bit. Because what benefits the country might be a bigger issue than what we have to deal with on an individual level. That is entirely possible. Are we willing to explore that issue? But you see, we tend to be benefit motivated. We tend to be very similar to Xerxes and Haman in some ways. Wouldn't you agree? And so that leads us then, if we're going to survive this mixed up world, if we're going to try to figure out how we're going to get through this, if we're going to figure out how on earth we are going to deal this mixed up, crazy world, we are going to have to be people of truth. We're going to have to seek it. We're going to have to learn it. We're going to have to speak it. Okay, that's what we're going to have to be. If we're going to be people that are going to survive for God's kingdom in this mixed up world, we got to be people of truth. We need to be people of truth. We have to seek it. We have to learn it. We have to speak it. And that's going to be our survival tip for the rest of our series for number 6. Congratulations. You out of 2 questions so far, you picked a survival tip. Now you're curious what the other one was. Too bad. Okay, but we're going to have to be these types of people to seek truth. It's been interesting. Just the other day, somebody misquoted Ken Ham. I don't know if you guys heard about this, that Ken Ham was interviewed regarding aliens on another planet and whatnot. And Ken Ham made a statement that about how he doesn't believe aliens exist, that God made everything basically for human existence, and everything was made for humanity and for humanity to know who God is, and that Jesus died for humans. And he started talking about the gospel, how without Jesus you're going to hell, and Jesus died for all mankind, and that's what Jesus is all about. Well, the news ended up saying that Ken Ham said that we need to stop looking for extraterrestrials because they're going to hell anyways. That was literally how they quoted it. CNN quoted it that way, and a couple of news articles quoted it that way. And so Ken Ham, in his blog, posted, by the way, I did not say it like that. I dare any of them to find me saying those words. It was not what was said at all. Here's the video of the interview that was done. Here's the transcript from the video. You can read it. I was talking about the gospel. I didn't say, don't look for them because they're going to hell anyways. I was saying that's not the case. I wasn't saying that they did exist, didn't exist. I wasn't about that. I made it about the gospel, and it's just interesting how our society so much really don't want to be people of truth. They want to be people of convenience, people of money, people of ratings, people of viewership. They want to be people that are benefited, not people of truth. The church should be better than that. The church should be full of people that are people of truth. So we need to seek it, learn it, and speak it. So now, from here, where should we go next? Get your numbers ready. Should we talk about this whole lazy thinker thing and talk about the cure, how we fix this problem? Or should we go on to how this entire story actually points to Jesus? Okay, so number 1 is a cure for this issue of being a lazy thinker and the truth issue, how we can cure it, or, and a much of a surprise thing, how the entire, when I say this story, it's not just today's story, but the entire book of Esther, how the whole thing actually points directly to Jesus himself. So 1 or 2, what do we got going on here? We got a big mess of numbers. There are clearly, though, significantly more 2s than 1s. So we will go to, and I don't know if people pick 2 because they're like, yeah, Jesus. That's the answer, right? That's what we're in church. We have to say Jesus. Pastor asks a question, we don't want the answer. We just say Jesus. And if it wasn't right, we just say, I'll just glorify Jesus. Praise you, Jesus. It's just a safe way of going. Okay, so how this whole thing points to Jesus. Just trying to check my slide numbers here to make sure we get everything just right. I want you to notice a little interesting details here. Verse 7 and verse 13 shows Haman's plot, okay? And what's interesting is as he starts, and we don't know if Haman's doing the casting lots thing, if he's doing it, every single day for as long as a year, or if he sat down rolling the dice, okay, not that day, rolling the dice, not that day, rolling the dice, not that day, and did that for hours until he did it 365 times. We don't know which it is. Either way, it ended up falling. I tend to view that he was doing it constantly until he got to the time that the lots felt the dice rolled the way he wanted it. you execute the Jews now. Okay, this is the day. And so, because, the lots work like a yes-no situation. And so the timing, we see it starting around verse 7, but he ends up picking the date at verse 13. And verse 13, the date is, do you see that you guys close your Bibles? I mean, we're still talking about Scripture here. You can open them back up. Esther chapter 3, verse 13. The date was what? It's on the 12th month. What was it? 13th day. The 13th day of the 12th month. Okay? You know what that day is? The eve of Passover. Okay? So the lots fell to exterminate the Jews on the eve of Passover. You'll find that reference there. You can find that in Leviticus chapter 23, verse 5, where it talks about how the 14th day is Passover at twilight, which means the 13th is Passover Eve. That's interesting. Why is it that worked out, that it fell on that day? Why make notice of that day? It's because of how the timing works out, that it's about Passover. So, it's a good thing it wasn't the day after that, because then the Jews might have had to done some work on Passover and might not have defended themselves right. So it's a good thing that it fell on the day before Passover. Although it's interesting that Esther allowed it to be extended. We'll talk about that when we get to the end of Esther there and how the Jews handled that. Very fun. So, nonetheless, on the eve of Passover points to what event in the Jewish history? What country? Egypt. There it is. Yes, Egypt. Okay? That points to Egypt. And it's neat, because here someone could say, oh my goodness, Haman's plotting to kill all the Jews. And the king blindly agreed. And before we start being too judgmental on Persia blindly agreeing, by the way, just a little tangent here for you, before we start getting on our high self-righteous horse of thinking that it's a good thing we live in our country where we don't have that issue and we don't blindly kill innocent people like that all the time. Have you ever thought about abortion recently? Okay, and on the how many millions of innocent unborn children are killed? And how the government approves and even sanctions. Okay, we have we are not that far different from Persia. Okay, so with that in mind now, when we think of this, and here's the Jews getting ready to be annihilated by Haman, the king totally agrees. Now it falls on the eve of Passover, allowing the Jewish mind and those that are really familiar with how the Old Testament works and pieces things together, we discovered that this Passover happened at Egypt. And what did God do for the Jews in Egypt at Passover time? What was this all about? The rescuing of the Jews. Whether they were being completely obedient to God or not, all they had to do was make sure they put blood on the doorposts. Okay, whether they were really good, true, 100% worshipers or not, they're all sinners, so none of them were perfect. So here they are in Egypt, and God rescued them out of Egypt. It's almost like a signpost in Esther that says, just as God rescued the Jews in Egypt, so God is still going to rescue the Jews today in this time of Esther here. He's always going to rescue them there. Haman's plot will not succeed. Okay, Haman's plot will not succeed. One of the questions we had in sermons past was, will God still be faithful to the covenant even when the Jews are in sin? Will God still be faithful to his covenant even when the Jews are rebelling and they're staying in exile willingly and they're purposely not rebuilding the temple? Will God still be faithful? The answer now is yes. God is still faithful even when we are not. God is still faithful. And then we find out that you're like, okay, great. We got Passover, rescuing of Jews. How does this point to Egypt? Because Paul made the statement in 1 Corinthians that Jesus is our ultimate Passover lamb. Jesus is our absolute, total Passover lamb. 1 Corinthians chapter 5, verse 7. Jesus is our Passover lamb. He paid the debt. He paid the sacrifice for all of humanity, those who are willing to call upon his name. And just for fun, let me point out a few other things here besides just the Passover issue. Just because we're here and we can, because it's just great. Like Mordecai and Esther working together as cousins. Jesus worked with his cousin, John the Baptist. So So that's an interesting little parallel that's there. And John the Baptist sees the real King of Kings and the real Lord of Lords when he sees Jesus. The cousins are looking at a king, Ahasuerus, Xerxes, who calls himself the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords, but he's not. What happens is we get this interesting story here where Xerxes stays on his throne and makes his judgments and his rulings. And when traitors came to Xerxes, he had them hung at the gallows. What does Jesus do to traitors that come to him? He gets off his throne, comes down to earth, and dies. See, traitors in Persia were executed. Traitors in Christianity, Jesus gets executed for the traitors. Every single one of us are traitors to Jesus because all of us are sinners. All of us are sinners. All of us have been a traitor to God. All of us have broken our relationship with God. All of us are unfaithful to God. All of us started into this world born in sin and continued in sin. That is our life. That is our reality. That is our existence. We are all sinners. Frustrates me when people say that there's hypocrites in the church. We start with the phrase, we are sinners. So at what point do you think we got it all figured out? Okay? We are the honest ones that say we're screw-ups. We start there, and praise God for grace, because without that, we're not making it. Praise God that we don't have a God like Xerxes. We don't have a king who is like Xerxes that says that if you don't do it right, I'm going to kill you. If you don't do it right, you're getting locked up forever. If you don't do it this way, at this manner, then you're going to be destroyed. Praise God that we have a type of king who actually says, you're not doing it right. You are screwing it all up. You have completely done this bad. You didn't do it my way. You deserve death. I will die for you. How great it is that we get a king who points to himself, and in reality, we have a King of Kings who points to himself in a way that is perfection. And he dies for us. How awesome is that? We have an entire story here about, in a sense, Jesus. We have a king that says, I will never forgive you for your actions. And we have a King of Kings who says, Father, forgive them, because I will pay the debt. That's what we have. We have an awesome Jesus. Think of it even like this. In the book of John, it says that Jesus said, I am the way and the truth and the life. In Jesus we find life. In Jesus we find the way. And if we are going to be people of truth, who ultimately are we going to run into? Jesus. If we're going to be people of truth, and that means eventually we're going to be people who are about Jesus, for Jesus, because of Jesus. We point to Jesus because Jesus is the way and Jesus is the life. And ultimately, he is the truth. See, this whole thing begins to point to Jesus. Question is, are we going to seek Jesus? Are we going to learn about Jesus? Are we going to speak about Jesus? Because that's the mission. That's the goal. If we are going to survive this mixed up world, we have to be people of truth who will seek it, learn it, and speak it. So seek Jesus, learn about Jesus, speak it. Speak about Jesus. We will find survival in this crazy, mixed up world. Let's have a word of prayer.